Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we continue in The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. We are up to chapter 20, and I will go ahead and start. Ralph Meeteth a Man in the Wood is the title of this chapter. But the morning began to wear as he sat deep in these thoughts, and still the carline came not to him, and he thought, She leaveth me alone that I may do her bidding, so will I without tarrying. And he arose and did on his hauberk and basnet, and girt his sword to his side, and went forth afoot as before. He crossed the river by a wide ford and stepping stone, somewhat below the pool wherein he had bathed on that first day. And already by then he had got so far, what with the fresh air of the beauteous morning, what with the cheerful tinkling of his sword and hauberk, he was somewhat amended of his trouble and heaviness of spirit. A little way across the river, but nigher to the wood, was a house, or cot, of that country folk, and an old woman sat spinning in the door. So Ralph went up thither and greeted her, and craved of her a draught of milk. So the goody turned about and cried out to one within, and there came forth one of the maidens whom Ralph had met fishing that other day. And the old woman bade her bring forth milk and bread. Then the carline looked hard at Ralph and said, Ah, I have heard tell of thee. Thou art abiding the turn of the days up at the castle yonder, as others have done before thee. Well, well, belike thou shalt have thy wish, though whether it shall be to thy profit, who shall say? Thereat Ralph's heart fell again, and he said, Sayest thou, mother, that there have been others abiding like me in the tower? I know not what thy words mean. The carline laughed. Well, said she, here comes thy morning's bait borne by shapely hands enough. Eat and drink first, and then will I tell thee my meaning. Therewith came the maiden forth with the bowl and the loaf. And indeed she was fair enough and shy and kind, but Ralph heeded her little, nor was his heart moved by her at all. She set a stool for him beside the door, and he sat down and ate and drank, though his heart was troubled, and the maiden hung about and seemed to find it no easy matter to keep her eyes off him. Presently the carline, who had been watching the two, said, Thou askest of the meaning of my words. Well, deemest thou that I have had more men than one to love me? I know not, mother, said Ralph, who could scarce hold himself patient. There now, quoth Carline, look at my damsel. She is not my daughter, but my brother's. There is a man, and a brisk lad too, whom she calleth her bachelor, and is, as I verily deem, well pleased with him. Yet lo you how she eyeth thee, thou fair man, and doth so with her raiment that thou mayest best see how shapely she is of limb and foot, and toyeth her right hand with her left wrist, and the like. Well, as for me, I have had more lovers than one or two. And why have I had just so many, and no more? Nay, thou needest not make any long answer to me. I am old now, and even before I was old, I was not young. I am now foul of favour, and even before I became foul, I was not so fair. Well, then? Yea, what then? Said Ralph. This, then, fair young fool, she said thee, the one whom thou lovest, long hath she lived, but she is not old to look on, nor foul, but fair. Oh, how fair! Then Ralph forgot his fear, and his heart grew greedy, and his eyes glistened, and he said, yet he spoke faintly, Yea, is she fair? What? Hast thou not seen her? Said the carline. Ralph called to mind the guise in which he had seen her in flushed bright red, as he answered, Yea, I deem that I have. Surely it was she. The carline laughed. Well, said she, however thou hast seen her, thou hast scarce seen her as I have. Said Ralph, How was that? Said she, It is her way here in the summer-tide to bathe her in the yonder pool up the water. And it was the same pool wherein Ralph had bathed. And she hath with me and my niece and two other women to hold up the silken cloth betwixt her body and the world, so that I have seen her as God made her, And I shall tell thee that when he was about that work, he was minded to be a craftsmaster. For there is no blemish about her that she should hide her at all or anywhere. Her sides are sleek, and her thighs no rougher than her face, and her feet as dainty as her hands. Yea, she is a pearl all over. Withal, she is as strong as a knight, and I warrant her hardier of heart than most knights. A happy man shalt thou be, for surely I deem thou hast not come hither to abide her without some token or warrant of her. Ralph held down his head, and he could not meet the old woman's eyes as she spake thus, and the maiden took herself out of earshot at the first words of the carline hereof, and was halfway down to the river by now. Ralph spake after a while, and said, Tell me, is she good, and a good woman? The dame laughed scornfully, and said, Surely, surely, she is the saint of the forest land, and the guardian of all poor folk. Ask the carles else. Ralph held his peace, and rose to be gone, and turning saw the damsel wading the shallow ford, and looking over her shoulder at him. He gave the dame good day, and departed lightfoot, but heavy-hearted. Yet as he went, he kept saying to himself, Did she not send that Roger to turn my ways hither? Yet she cometh not. Surely she hath changed in these last days, or it may be in these last hours, yea, or this very hour. Amidst such thoughts he came into the wood, and made his way by the paths and open places, going south and east of the house, whereas the last day he had gone west and north. He went a soft space, but wandered on without any stay till it was noon. And he had seen naught but the wild things of the wood, nor many of them. But at last he heard the tinkle of a little bell coming towards him. So he stood still and got the hilt of his sword ready to his hand. And the tinkle drew nearer, and he heard withal the trample of some riding beast. So he went toward the south. And presently, in a clearer place of the wood, he came upon a man of religion, a clerk, riding on a hackney, to whose neck hung a horse-bell. The priest had saddlebags beside him, and carried in his right hand a book and a bag. When he met Ralph, he blessed him, and Ralph gave him the seele of the day, and asked him whither he would. Said the priest, I am for the little plain, in the land of abundance. Whence art thou, my son, and whither wilt thou? From that very land I come, said Ralph, and as to whither, I seek adventures. But unless I see more than I have this forenoon, or thou canst tell me of them, back will I whence came. Yet to say sooth, I shall not be sorry for a fellow to help me back, for these woodland ways are somewhat blind. Said the priest, I will bear thee company with a good will, and I know the road right well. For I am the vicar, appointed by the fathers of the Thorn to serve the church of the little plain, and the chapel of St. Anthony yonder in the wood. And today I go to the church of the good folk there. So Ralph turned and went along with him, walking by his bridle rein. And as they went, the priest said to him, Art thou one of my lady's lords? Ralph reddened as he sighed, and said, I am no captain of hers. Then smiled the priest, and said, Then will I not ask of thee thine errand, for belike thou wouldest not tell me thereof. Ralph said naught, but waxed shamefaced as he deemed that the priest eyed him curiously. At last he said, I will ask thee a question in turn, father. Yea, said the priest. Said Ralph, This lady of the land, the lady of abundance, is she a very woman? Holy saints, quoth the priest, blessing himself, what meanest thou? Said Ralph, I mean, is she of those who outwardly have a woman's semblance, but within are of the race of the ancient devils, the gods of the Gentiles? Then the priest crossed himself again, and spake as solemnly as a judge on the bench. Son, I pray that if thou art not in thy right mind, thou wilt come thereinto anon. Know this, that whatever else she may be, she is a right holy woman. Or hast thou perchance heard any evil tales concerning her? Now Ralph was confused at his word, and knew not what to say. For though in his mind he had been piecing together all that he had heard of the lady, both good and for evil, he had no clear tale to tell even to himself, so he answered nothing. But the priest went on, Son, I shall tell thee that such tales I have heard, but from whose mouth forsooth? I will tell thee from a sort of idle jades, young women who would be thought fairer than they be, who are afraid of everything save a naked man, and who can lie easier than they that can say the paternoster. From such as they come the stories. Or from old crones who live in sour anger with themselves and all else, because they have lived no goodly life in their youth, and have not learned the loveliness of the Holy Church. Now, son, shall the tales of such women, old and young, weigh in thy mind beside the word I tell thee of what I have seen and know concerning this most excellent of ladies? I trow not, and for my part I tell thee that though she is verily as fair as Venus, God save us, yet she is as chaste as Agnes, as wise as Catherine, and as humble and meek as Dorothy. She bestoweth her goods plentifully to the church, and is merciful to poor men therewith, and so far as occasion may serve her, she is constant at the holy office. Neither doth she spare to confess her sins, and to do all penance which is bidden her, yea, and more. For though I cannot say to my knowledge that she weareth a hair, yet once and again I have seen her wending this woodland towards the chapel of her friend St. Anthony by night and cloud, so that few might see her obedient to the scripture which saith, Let not thy right hand know what thy left hand doeth. And she barefoot in her smock amidst the rugged wood, and so arrayed fairer than any queen in a golden gown, yea, as fair as the woodwives of the ancient heathen. Therewith the priest stayed his words, and seemed as if he were fallen into a dream, and he sighed heavily. But Ralph walked on by his bridle rein, dreaming no less, for the words that he had heard he heeded not, save as they made pictures for him of the ways of that woman of the forest. So they went on soberly till the priest lifted up his head and looked about like one come out of a slumber, and said in a firm voice, I tell thee, my son, that thou mayest set thy love upon her without sin. And therewith suddenly he fell a-weeping. And Ralph was ill at ease of his weeping, and went along by him not, till the priest plucked up heart again, and said, turning to Ralph, but not meeting his eye, My son, I weep because men and women are so evil, and missay each other so sorely, even as they do by this holy woman. As he spake, his tears brake out again, and Ralph strode on fast so as to outgo him, thinking it unmannerly to seem as if he noted not his sorrow, yet withal unable to say aught to him thereof. Moreover, it irked him to hear a grown man weeping for grief, even though it were but a priest. Within a while the priest caught up with him, his tears all staunched, and fell to talk with him cheerfully concerning the wood, and the little land and the dwellers therein, and the conditions of them, and he praised them much, save the women. Ralph answered him with good cheer and likewise, and thus they came to the cot of the old woman. And both she and the maiden were without the house, the old carline hithering and thithering on some errand, the maiden leaning against a tree as if pondering some matter. As they passed by, the priest blessed them in words, but his eyes scowled on them, whereat the carline grinned, but the damsel heeded him not, but looked wistfully on Ralph. The priest muttered somewhat as he passed, which Ralph caught not the meaning of, and fell moody again. And when he was a little past the ford, he drew rein and said, Now, son, I must to my cell hard by the church yonder, but yet I will say one word to thee ere we sunder. To wit, that my mind, the holy lady, will no one love but the saints of heaven, save it be some man with whom all women are in love. Therewith he turned away suddenly, and rode smartly towards his church. And Ralph deemed that he was weeping once more. As for Ralph, he went quietly home toward the castle, for the sun was setting now, and as he went he pondered all these things in his heart. Chapter 21. Ralph weareth away 3 days uneasily. He read again in the book that night, till he had gotten the whole tale into his head, and he specially noted this of it, that it told not whence that lady came, nor what she was, nor aught else save that she was in the wood by herself, and was found therein by the king's son. Neither told the tale in what year of the world she was found there, though it told concerning all war and miseries which she had bred, and which long endured. Again, he could not gather from that book why she had gone back to the lone place in the woods, whereas she might have wedded one of those warring barons who sorely desired her, nor why she had yielded herself to the witch of that place and endured with patience her thraldom, with stripes and torments of her body like the worst of the thralls of the ancient heathen men. Lastly, he might not learn from the book where in the world was that lone place, or aught of the road to the well at the world's end. But amidst all this thinking, his heart came back to this. When I meet her, she will tell me of it all. I need be no wiser than to learn how to meet her and to make her love me. Then shall she show me the way to the well at the world's end, and I shall drink thereof and never grow old, even as she endureth in youth, and she shall love me forever, and I her forever. So he thought, but yet amidst these happy thoughts came in this evil one, that whereas all the menfolk spoke well of her and worshipped her, the womenfolk feared her or hated her, even to the lecherous old woman who had praised the beauty of her body for his torment. So he thought till his head grew heavy, and went and lay down in his bed and slept, and dreamed of the days of Upmead, and things forgotten in his waking time came between him and any memories of his present longing and the days thereof. He awoke and arose betimes in the morning, and when he had breakfasted, he bade the carline bring him his weapons. "Wilt thou again to the wood?" said she. "Didst thou not bid me fare thither yesterday?" said he. "Yea," she said, "but today I fear lest thou depart and come not back." He laughed and said, "Seest not thou, mother, that I go afoot, and I in hauberk and helm? I cannot run far or fast from thee. Also," and here he broke off his speech a little, "where should I be but here?" "Ah," she said, "but who knows what may happen?" Nevertheless, she went and fetched his war gear and looked at him fondly as he did it on, and went his ways from the hall. Now he entered the wood more to the south than he had done yesterday, and went softly as before. And still was he turning over in his mind the thoughts of last night, and ever they came back. Might I but see her? Would she but love me? Oh, for a draught of the well at the world's end, that the love might last long and long. So he went on a while betwixt the trees and the thickets, till it was a little past noon. But all on a sudden a panic fear took him, lest she should indeed come to the castle while he was away, and not finding him depart again, who knows whither. And when this thought came upon him, he cried aloud and hastened at his swiftness back again to the castle. He came there breathless and wearied, and ran to the old woman and cried out to her, "Is she come? Is she come?" The carline laughed and said, "Nay, she is not, but thou art come. Praise be to the saints. But what aileth thee? Nay, fear not, she shall come at last." Then grew Ralph shamefaced and turned away from her, and miscalled himself for a fool and a dastard, that he could not abide the pleasure of his lady at the very place whereto she had let lead him. So he wore through the remnant of the day howso he might without going out a doors again. And the carline came and spake with him, but whatever he asked her about the lady, she would not tell aught of any import. So he refrained from that talk, and made a show of hearkening when she spake of other matters, as tales concerning the folk of the land, and the fathers of the thorn, and so forth. On the next morning he arose and said to himself that whatever betide, he would abide in the castle and in the plain of abundance till the lady came. And he went amongst the haymaking folk in the morning, and ate his dinner with them, and strove to be of good cheer, and belike the carles and queens thought him merry company. But he was now wearying his heart with longing, and might not abide in any great while in one place. So when dinner over, they turned to their work again, and he went back to the castle and read in that book, and looked at the pictures thereof, and kept turning his wonder and hope and fear over and over again in his mind, and making to himself stories of how he should meet the lady, and what she would say to him, and how he should answer her, till at last the night came, and he went to his bed and slept for the very weariness of his longing. When the new day came, he arose and went into the hall, and found the carline there. She said to him, "Fair sir, wilt thou to the wood again today?" "Nay," said Ralph, "I must not. I dare not." "Well," she said, "thou mayest if thou wilt. Why shouldest thou not go?" Said Ralph, reddening and stammering, "Because I fear to. Thrice have I been away long from the castle, and all has gone well, but the fourth time she will come and find me gone." The carline laughed. "Well," she said, "I shall be here if thou goest, for I promise thee not to stir out of the house whiles thou art away." Said Ralph, "Nay, I will abide here." "Yea," she said, "I see, thou trustest me not. Well, no matter, and today it will be handy if thou abidest, for I have an errand to my brother in the flesh, who is one of the brethren of the thorn over yonder. If thou wilt give me leave, it will be my pleasure and gain." Ralph was glad when he heard this, deeming that if she left him alone there, he would be the less tempted to stray into the wood again. Besides, he deemed that the lady might come that day when he was alone in the castle, and that him seemed would make the meeting sweeter yet. So he yea said the carlines, asking joyously, and in an hour's time she went her ways and left him alone there. Ralph said to himself, and when he saw her depart, that he would have the more joy in the castle of his lady if he were alone, and would wear away the day in better patience therefore. But in sooth the hours of the day were worse to wear than any day there had yet been. He went not without the house at all that day, for he deemed that the folk abroad would note of him that he was so changed and restless. Whilst he read in that book, or turned the leaves over, not reading it. Whilst he went into the chamber of estate, and pored over the woven pictures, there wherein the lady was figured. Whilst he wandered from chamber to chamber, not knowing what to do. At last, a little after dark, back comes the carline again, and he met her at the door of the hall, for he was weary of his own company, and the ceaselessness turning over and over of the same thoughts. As for her, she was so joyous of him that she fairly threw her arms about him and kissed him and clipped him as though she had been his very mother, whereof he had some shame, but not much, for he deemed that her goodwill to him was abundant, which indeed it was. Now she looks on him and says, "Truly it does my heart good to see thee. But thou poor boy, thou art wearing thyself with thy longing and thy doubting, and if thou wilt do after my rede, thou wilt certainly go into the wood tomorrow, and see what may befall. And indeed, and in sooth, thou wilt leave behind thee a trusty friend." He looked on her kindly, and smiled, and said, "In sooth, mother, I deem thou art but right, though it be hard for me to leave this house, to which in a way my lady hath bidden me. Yet I will do thy bidding herein." She thanked him, and he went to his bed and slept, for now that he had made up his mind to go, he was somewhat more at rest. Chapter 22. An Adventure in the Wood. Ralph arrayed himself for departure next morning without more words, and when he was ready, the carline said to him, "When thou wentest forth before, I was troubled at thy going, and feared for thy returning. But now I fear not, for I know that thou wilt return, though it may be leading a fair woman by the hand. So go, and all luck go with thee." Ralph smiled at her words, and went his ways, and came into the wood that lay due south from the castle. And he went on, and had no thought of turning back. He rested twice, and still went on, till the fashion of the thickets and the woods changed about him. And at last, when the sun was getting low, he saw light gleaming through a great wood of pines, which had long been dark before him against the tall boles. And soon he came to the very edge of the wood, and going heedfully, saw between the great stems of the outermost trees a green strand, and beyond it a long smooth water, a little lake between grass banks on either side. He came out of the pine wood onto the grass, but there were thorn bushes a few about, so that moving warily from one to the other, he might perchance see without being seen. Warily he went forsooth, going along the green strand to the east and the head of that water, and saw how the bank sloped up gently from its ending toward the pine wood. in front of whose close-set trees stood 3 great bold tall oak trees on a smooth piece of green sward. And now he saw that there were folk come before him on this green place, and keen-sighted as he was, could make out that 3 men were on the hither side of the oak trees, and on the further side of them was a white horse. Thitherward then he made, stealing from bush to bush, since he deemed that he needed not to be seen of men who might be foes, for at the first sight he had noted the gleam of weapons there. And now he had gone no long way before he saw the westering sun shine brightly from a naked sword, and then another sprang up to meet it, and he heard faintly the clash of steel, and saw withal that the third of the folk had long and light raiment, and was a woman belike. Then he bettered his pace, and in a minute or two came so near that he could see the men clearly, that they were clad in knightly war gear, and were laying on great strokes, so that the little place rang with a clatter. As for the woman, he could see but little of her because of the fighting men before her, and the shadow of the oak boughs fell on her withal. Now as he went, hidden by the bushes, they hid the men also from him. And when he was come to the last bush, some 50 paces from them, and peered out from it, in that very nick of time the 2 knights were breathing them somewhat. And Ralph saw that one of them, the furthest from him, was a very big man, with a blue surcoat, whereon was beaten a great golden sun. And the other, whose back was towards Ralph, was clad in black over his armor. Even as he looked and doubted whether to show himself or not, he of the sun raised his sword aloft, and giving forth a great roar as of wrath and grief mingled together, rushed on his foe and smote so fiercely that he fell to the earth before him. And the big man fell upon him as he fell, and let knee and sword pommel and fist follow the stroke, and there they wallowed on the earth together. Straightway Ralph came forth from the bushes with his drawn sword in his hand, and even therewith, with the 2 knights being both low upon the earth, what with the woman herself coming from out of the shadow of the oak boughs, and turning toward her Ralph, he saw her clearly, and stood staring and amazed, for lo, it was the lady whom he had delivered at the Wantways. His heart well nigh stood still with joy, yet he was shamefaced also. For though now she was no longer clad in that scanty raiment, yet did he seem to see her body through that which covered it. But now her attire was but simple, a green gown, thin and short, and thereover a coat hardy of black cloth, with orfrays of golden colours. But on her neck was a collar that seemed to him like that of which Dame Catherine had given him, and the long tresses of her hair, which he had erst seen floating loose about her, were wound as a garland around her head. She looked with a flushed and joyous face on Ralph, and seemed as if she heeded not the battle of the knights, but saw him only. But he feared her and his love for her. He stood still, and durst not move forward to go to her. Thus they abode for about the space of 1 minute. And meanwhile the big man rose up on one knee, and was steadied with him his sword for a moment of time, and the blade was bloody from the point halfway up to the hilt. But the Black Knight lay still and made no sign of life. Then the Knight of the Sun rose up slowly and stood on his feet and faced the lady, and seemed not to see Ralph, for his back was towards him. He came slowly toward the lady scowling, and his face white as chalk. Then he spake to her coldly and sternly, stretching out his bloody sword before her. "I have done thy bidding, and slain my very earthly friend of friends for thy sake. Wherewith wilt thou reward me?" Then once more Ralph heard the voice which he remembered so sweet amidst the peril and battle aforetime, as she said as coldly as the knight, "I bade thee not, thine own heart bade thee to strive with him, because thou deemest that he loved me. Be content, thou hast slain him who stood in thy way, as thou deemest. Thinkest thou that I rejoice at his slaying? Oh no, I grieve at it, for all that I had such good cause to hate him." He said, mine own heart, half of my heart biddeth me slay thee, who hast made me slay him. What wilt thou give me?" She knit her brow and spake angrily. "Leave to depart," she said. Then after a while, and in a kinder voice, "And thus much of my love, that I pray thee not to sorrow for me, but to have a good heart and live as a true knight should. He frowned. Wilt thou not go with me? Said he. Not uncompelled, she said. If thou biddest me go with threats of hewing and mangling the body, which thou sayest thou lovest, needs must I go then. Yet scarce wilt thou do this. I have a mind to try it, said he. If I set thee on thine horse, and bound thine hands for thee, and link thy feet together under the beast's belly, belike thou wouldest come. Shall I have slain my brother in arms for naught? Thou hast the mind, said she. Hast thou the might? So I deem, said he, smiling grimly. She looked at him proudly and said, Yea, but I misdoubt me thereof. He still had his back to Ralph and was staring at the lady. She turned her head a little and made a sign to Ralph, just as the Knight of the Sun said, Thou misdoubtest thee? Who shall help thee in thy desert? Look over thy left shoulder, she said. He turned and saw Ralph drawing near, sword in hand, smiling but somewhat pale. He drew aback from the lady and, spinning round on his heel, faced Ralph and cried out, Ha! Hast thou raised up a devil against me, thou sorceress, to take me from my grief and my lust, and my life? Fair will the game be to fight with the devil as I have fought with my friend, yet now I know not whether I shall slay him or thee. She spake not, but stood quietly looking on him, not unkindly, while a wind came up from the water and played with the few light locks of hair that hung down from that ruddy crown, and blew her raiment from her feet, and wrapped it close around her limbs. And Ralph beheld her, and close as was the very death to him, for huge and most warrior-like was his foeman, yet longing for her melted the heart within him, and he felt the sweetness of life in his inmost soul as he had never felt it before. Suddenly the Knight of the Sun turned about to the lady again, and fell down on his knees before her, and clasped his hands as one praying. He then said, Now pardon me all my words, I pray thee, and let this young man depart unhurt, whether thou madest him, or hast but led him away from country and friends and all. Then do thou come with me, and make some semblance of loving me, and suffer me to love thee, and then shall all be well, for in a few days we will go back to thy people, and there will I be their lord, or thy servant, or my brother's man, or what thou wilt. O wilt thou not let the summer days be sweet? But she spake, holding up her head proudly, and speaking in a clear ringing voice. I have said it that uncompelled I will not go with thee at all. And therewithal she turned her face toward Ralph, as she might do on any chance-met courteous man. And he saw her smiling, but she said naught to him, and gave no token of knowing him. Then the Knight of the Sun sprang to his feet, and shook his sword above his head, and ran furiously on Ralph, who leapt nimbly on one side, else he had been slain at once, and fitched a blow at the Sun Knight, and smote him, and brake the mails of his left shoulder, so that the blood sprang and fell on fiercely enough, smiting to right and left, as the other gave back to his first onset. But all was for naught. For the Knight of the Sun, after his giving aback under that first stroke, drew himself up stark and stiff, and pressing on through all Ralph's stroke, though they rent his mail here and there, ran with his sword and smote him furiously with the sword pommel on the side of the head, so that the young man of the Upmeads could not stand up under the weight of the blow, but fell to the earth swooning. And the Knight of the Sun knelt on him and drew out the lance, short, thick, sharp, and cried out, Now, devil, let's see whether thou wilt bleed black. Therewith he raised up his hand, but the weapon was stayed, or ever it fell, for the lady had glided up to them when she saw that Ralph was overcome, and now she stretched out her arm and caught hold of the knight's hand, and the anlance withal, and he groaned and cried out, What now? Thou art strong-armed as well as white-armed. For she had rent the sleeve back from her right arm, and he laughed in the extremity of his wrath, but she was pale, and her lips quivered, as she said softly and sweetly, Wilt thou verily slay this young man? And why not, said he, since I have just slain the best friend that I ever had, though he was not willing to fight with me, and only for this that I saw thee toying with him. Thou, forsooth, thou hast said truly that thou hadst more reason to hate him than love him. Well, since thou wilt not have this youngling slain, I may deem at least that he is no devil of thy making, else wouldest thou be glad of his slaying, so that he might be out of the path of thee. So a man he is, and a well-favoured one, and young, and valiant, as it seemeth. So I suppose that he is thy lover, or will be one day. Well then. And he lifted his hand again, but again she stayed him, and said, Look thou, I will buy him of thee, and indeed I owe him a life. How was that? Said he. Why wouldst thou know? She said, Thou who, if thou hadst me in thy hands again, wouldst keep me away from all men. Yea, I know what thou wouldst say. Thou wouldst keep me from sinning again. And she smiled but bitterly. Well, the tale is no long one. 5 days ago I was taken by them of the Burg, and thou wottest what they would do with me. Yea, even they deemed me less than they do deem me. Well, as 2 of their men-at-arms were leading me along by a halter, as a calf is led to the butcher, we fell in with this goodly lad, who slew both in manly fashion, and I escaped for that time. Though, forsooth, I must needs put my neck in the noose again in delivering 4 of our people who would else have been tormented to the death by the burghers. Well, said the knight, perchance thou hast more mercy than I looked for of thee, though I misdoubt thee that thou mayest yet pray me or some other to slay him for thee. Thou art merciful, my queen, though not to me, and a churl were I if I were less merciful than thou. Therefore will I give his life to him, yet not to thee will I give him, if I may help it. Lo you, sweet, he is just opening his eyes. Therewith he rose up from Ralph, who raised himself a little, and sat up dazed and feeble. The Knight of the Sun stood up over him, beside the lady, with his hands clasped on his sword hilt, and said to Ralph, Young man, canst thou hear my words? Ralph smiled feebly, and nodded a yea-say. Dost thou love thy life, then? Said the knight. Ralph found his speech, and said faintly, Yea. Said the knight, Where dost thou come from? Where is thine home? Said Ralph, Upmeads. Well then, quoth the big knight, go back to Upmeads and live. Ralph shook his head, and knit his brows, and said, I will not. Yea, said the knight, thou wilt not live? Then must I shape me to thy humour. Stand on thy feet, and fight it out, for now I am cool, I will not slay a swordless man. Ralph staggered up to his feet, but was so feeble still that he sank down again and muttered, I may not, I am sick and faint, and therewith swooned away again. But the knight stood a while leaning on his sword and looking down on him not unkindly. Then he turned about to the lady, but lo, she had left his side. She had glided away and got to her horse, which was tethered on the other side of the oak tree, and had loosed him and mounted him, and so sat in the saddle there, the reins gathered in her hands. She smiled on the knight as he stood astonished, and cried to him, Now, lord, I warn thee, draw not a single foot nigher to me. If thou seest that I have Silverfax between my knees, and thou knowest how swift he is, and if I see thee move, he shall spring away with me. Thou wottest how well I know all the ways of the woodland, and I tell thee that the ways behind me to the Dry Tree be all safe and open, and that beyond the gliding river I shall come on Roger of the Rope Walk and his men. And if thou thinkest to ride after me and overtake me, cast the thought out of thy mind, for thy horse is strong but heavy, as is meet for so big a knight, and moreover he is many yards away from me and Silverfax. So before thou art in the saddle, where shall I be? Yea, for the knight was handling his anlance, thou mayest cast it, and peradventure mayest hit Silverfax and not me, and peradventure not. And I deem that it is my body alive that thou wouldest have back with thee. So now wilt thou hearken? Yea, quoth the knight, though for wrath he could scarce bring the word from his mouth. Hearken, she said, this is the bargain to be struck between us. Even now thou wouldest not refrain from slaying this young man, unless perchance he should swear to depart from us. And as for me, I would not go back with thee to Sunholm, where erst thou shamest me. Now will I buy thy naysay with mine, and if thou give the youngling his life, and suffer him to come his ways with us, Then will I go home with thee, and will ride with thee in all love and duty that I owe thee. Or if thou like this fashion or words better, I will give thee my body for his life. But if thou likest not the bargain, there is not another piece of goods for thee in the market. For then I will ride my ways to the Dry Tree, and thou shalt slay the poor youth, or make of him thy sworn friend, like as was Walter, which thou wilt. So she spake, and Ralph yet lay on the grass and heard not. But the knight's face was dark and swollen with anger as he answered, My sworn friend? Yea, I understand thy jibe. I need not thy words to bring to mind how I have slain one sworn friend for thy sake. Nay, she said, not for my sake, for thine own folly's sake. He heeded her not, but went on, And as for this one, I say again of him, if he be not the devil, then thou meanest him for thy lover. And now I deem that I will verily slay him, ere he wake again. Belike it were his better luck. She said, I wot not that thou hagglest over the price of that thou wouldest have. If thou have him along with thee, shall he not be in thy power, as I shall be? And thou mayest slay him or me when thou wilt. Yea, he said grimly, when thou art weary of him, O art thou not shameless among women, yet must I needs pay thy price, though my honour and the welfare of my life go with it. Yet how if he have no will to fare with us? She laughed and said, Then shalt thou have him with thee as thy captive and thrall. Hast thou not conquered him in battle? He stood silent a moment, and then he said, Thou sayest it. He shall come with me, will he nill he unarmed, and as a prisoner, and the spoil of my valiancy. And he laughed, not altogether in bitterness, but as if some joy were rising in his heart. Now, my queen, said he, the bargain is struck betwixt us, and thou mayest light down off Silverfax. As for me, I will go fetch water from the lake, that we may wake up this valiant and mighty youth, this new-found jewel, and bring him to his wits again. She answered not, but rode her horse close to him, and lighted down nimbly, while his greedy eyes devoured her beauty. Then he took her hand and drew her to him, and kissed her cheek, and she suffered it, but kissed him not again. Then he took off his helm, and went down to the lake to fetch up water therein. Chapter 23. The Leechcraft of the Lady. Meanwhile she went to Ralph, and stood by him, who now began to stir again, and she knelt down by him and kissed his face gently, and rose up hastily, and stood a little aloof again. Now Ralph sat up and looked about him, and when he saw the lady, he first blushed red, and then turned very pale, for the full life was in him again, and he knew her, and love drew strongly at his heartstrings. But she looked on him kindly, and said to him, How fares it with thee? I am sorry of thy hurt, which thou hast had for me. He said, Forsooth, lady, a chance knock or two is no great matter for a lad of Upmeads. But oh, I have seen thee before. Yea, she said, twice before, fair knight. How is that? He said. Once I saw thee, the fairest thing in the world, and evil men would have led thee to slaughter, but not twice. She smiled on him still more kindly, as if he were a dear friend, and said simply, I was that lad in the cloak that ye saw in the Flower de Luce, and afterwards, when ye, thou and Roger fled away from the Burg of the Four Friths, I had come into the burg with my captain of war at the peril of our lives, to deliver 4 faithful friends of mine, who were else doomed to an evil death. He said naught, but gazed at her face, wondering at her valiancy and goodness. She took him by the hand now, and held it without speaking for a little while, and he sat there still looking up into her face, wondering at her sweetness and his happiness. Then she said, as she drew her hand away and spake in such a voice, and so looking at him, that every word was as a caress to him, Thy soul is coming back to thee, my friend, and art thou well at ease? Is it not so? Oh, yea, he said, and I woke up happily and now. For me dreamed that my gossip came to me and kissed me kindly, and she is a fair woman, but not a young woman. As he spoke, the knight, who had come nearly noiselessly over the grass, stood by them, holding his helm full of water, and looking grimly upon them. But the lady looked up at him with wide eyes wonderingly, And Ralph, beholding her, deemed that all he had heard of her goodness was but the very sooth. But the knight spake, Young man, thou hast fought with me, thou knowest not wherefore, and grim was my mood when thou madest thine onset, and still is, so that never but once wilt thou be nigher thy death than thou hast been this hour. But now I have given thee life because of the asking of this lady, and therewith I give thee leave to come thy ways with us. Nay, rather, I command thee to come, for thou art my prisoner, to be kept or ransomed, or set free as I will. But my will is that thou shalt not have thine armor and weapons, and there is a cause for this, which may happen I will tell thee hereafter. But now I bid thee drink of this water, and then do off thine helm and hauberk, and give me thy sword and dagger, and go with us peaceably. And be not overmuch ashamed, for I have overcome men who boasted themselves to be great warriors. So Ralph drank of the water, and did off his helm, and cast water on his face. Then he arose and said, smiling, Nay, my master, I am not ashamed of my mishaps, and as to my going with thee and the lady, thou hast heard me say under thy dagger that I would not forbear to follow her, so I scarce need thy command thereto. The knight scowled on him and said, Hold thy peace, fool. Thou wert best not to stir my wrath again. Nay, said Ralph, thou hast my sword, and mayest slay me if thou wilt, therefore be not word valiant with me. Said the Knight of the Sun, Well, well, thou hast the right of it there. Only beware lest thou try me overmuch. But now must we set forth on our road, and here is work for thee to do. 100 yards within the thick wood in a straight line from the oak tree thou shalt find 2 horses, mine and the knight's who fell before me. Go thou and bring them hither, for I will not leave thee with my lady, lest I have to slay thee in the end, and maybe her also. Ralph nodded cheerfully, and set off on his task, and was the readier therein, because the lady looked on him kindly and compassionately as he went by her. He found the horses speedily, a black horse that was of the Black Knight, and a bay of the Knight of the Sun, and he came back with them lightly. But when he came to the oak tree again, lo, the knight and the lady both kneeling over the body of the Black Knight. And Ralph saw that the Knight of the Sun was sobbing and weeping sorely, so that he deemed that he was taking leave of his friend that lay dead there. But when Ralph had tied up those other 2 steeds by Silverfax, and drawn rear to those twain, the Knight of the Sun looked up at him, and spake in a cheerful voice, Thou seemest to be no ill man. Thou hast come across my lady. So now I bid thee rejoice that there is a good knight more in the world than we deemed in now, for this my friend Walter the Black is alive still. Yea, said the lady, and belike he shall live a long while yet. So Ralph looked, and saw that they had stripped the knight of his hauberk and helm, and bared his body, and that the lady was dressing a great and sore wound in his side. Neither was he come to himself again. He was a young man, and very goodly to look on, dark-haired and straight of feature, fair of face. And Ralph felt a grief at his heart as he beheld the lady's hands dealing with his bare flesh, though not the man knew of it belike. As for the Knight of the Sun, he was no more grim and moody, but smiling and joyous. And he spake and said, Young man, this shall stand thee in good stead, that I have not slain my friend this bout. Sooth to say, it might have else gone hard with thee on the way to my house, or still more in my house. But now be of good heart, for unless of thine own folly thou run on the sword's point, thou mayest yet live and do well. Then he turned to the lady and said, Dame, for as good a leech as ye be, ye may not heal this man, so that he may sit in his saddle within these 10 days. And now what is to do in this matter? She looked on him with smiling lips and a strange light in her eyes, and said, Yea, forsooth, what wilt thou do? Wilt thou abide here by Walter thyself alone, and let me bring the imp of Upmeads home to our house? Or wilt thou ride home and send folk with a litter to us? Or shall this youngling ride at all adventure, and seek to Sunway through the blind woodland? Which shall it be? The knight laughed outright and said, Yea, fair one, this is much like to the tale of the carle at the ferry with the fox and the goat and the cabbage. There was scarce a smile on her face, and she said gently, "One thing is to be thought of, that Walter's soul is not yet so fast in his body that either thou or some rough-handed leech may be sure of healing him. It must be this hand, and the learning which it hath learned over must deal with him for a while." And she stretched out her arm over the wounded man, with the fingers pointing down the water, and reddened withal, as if she felt the heart's greediness of the two men who were looking on her beauty. The big knight sighed and said, "Well, unless I am to kill him over again, there is nothing for it but our abiding with him for the next few hours at least. Tomorrow is a new day, and fair as the woodland hall of summertide, neither shall water fail us. But as to victual, I wot not save that we have none." The lady laughed and said to Ralph, "Who knoweth what thou mayest find if thou go back to the Black Horse, and look into the saddlebags which I saw upon him a while agone? For indeed we need somewhat, if it were but to keep the life of the body of this wounded man." Ralph sprang up, then turned to the horse, and found the saddlebags on him. And he took from them bread and flesh, and a flask of good wine, and brought them to the lady, who laughed and said, "Thou art a good seeker, and no ill-finder." Then she gave the wounded man to drink of the wine, so that he stirred somewhat, and the colour came into his face a little. Then she bade gather store of bracken for a bed for the Black Knight, and Ralph bestirred himself therein. But the Knight of the Sun sat looking at the lady as she busied herself with his friend, and gloom seemed gathering on him again. But when the bracken was enough, the lady made a bed deftly and speedily, and between the three they laid the wounded man thereon, who seemed coming to himself somewhat, and spake a few words, but those nothing to the point. Then the lady took her gay embroidered cloak, which lay at the foot of the oak tree, and cast it over him, and as Ralph deemed, eyed him lovingly. And belike the Knight of the Sun thought in likewise, for he scowled upon her. And for a while but was little the joyance by the ancient oak, unless it were with the lady. This is the end of chapters 20 through 23 of The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. Thank you for listening.